Hello, this is Haven Harrington from the Main Event Sports Show. We come to you live from the Tunaville Tavern with a great Main Event on Politics segment. I'm here joined by my good friend Dennis Frankenberger.
Yes, sir. Haven, glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you here. So now you've been on the Arena Authority for quite a while.
I have been on the Arena Authority. I've been against the Arena Authority, but I've been criticizing them for quite a while. Yes.
Well, that's what I'm about on the Arena
Right.
Authority, not a member of the Arena Authority, but
Right.
kind of on their case about the horrible arena deal and how it was just restructured by just a little bit. Louisville could realize a savings of over $300 million.
Accurate. That's accurate. Even though the mayor has tried to discredit me as early as a week ago, I've got multiple numbers of friends who are CPAs, financial analysts, actually one guy who's running for state auditor, many folks who are professionals who have validated my numbers. The numbers are in my favor. Actually, I didn't create the numbers. I took them from the bond prospectus that was the refinanced bond prospectus that occurred on December the 1st, 2017. So they're not my numbers. They were their numbers.
Oh, wow. Okay. So just so people know, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Okay. I've been involved in business in Louisville since the late 1960s. I owned Advanced Machinery Company based here in Louisville. We had offices and warehouses and technical centers in Los Angeles and Boston and Indianapolis. And GE Capital bought my firm in 1999.
Okay. So you're a businessman here that owns several businesses. You got bought out by GE Capital. So you're a concerned citizen. And when you saw what the arena deal looked like, you kind of looked over the numbers that were provided by the Arena Authority themselves.
Correct.
And we're kind of like, well, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't look right. So why don't you kind of give us an idea of what's wrong with the way the arena deal is structured now?
You're right. The Arena Authority negotiated a lease with the University of Louisville Athletic Association before its opening in 2010, and those negotiations took place 2008. The lease between the Arena Authority and the University of Louisville Athletic Association was signed by now fired James Ramsey. It was negotiated by Tom Jurek, both of which are no longer around anymore, and essentially approved by the 15-member Louisville Arena Authority. 8 of those members are also directors of the University of Louisville or the University of Louisville Athletic Association, or their spouses were, or they were closely associated, to the extent that if the lease today was contested by an outside organization, there'd be no chance they would ever stand up in court because it wasn't conducted on an arm's length basis. The lease is really so bad for taxpayers that because of the lease and the terms and the conditions of the lease, taxpayers, as of right now, are going to have to pay over the next 30 years $1.3 billion.
Oh, wow.
Billion into the Arena Authority as support for the Arena Authority and Yum Center in order to pay its debt.
No, back up for a second. You said that taxpayers are going to have to pay $1.3 billion into Arena, but if I remember correctly, didn't Arena only cost like $300 million? Like, where's this extra, literally $1 billion coming from?
If you ask the Louisville Arena Authority, or you go on the website of the KFC Yum Center, they will tell you that the Yum Center cost $265 million to build, which is false. I have copies of the audited financial statements, and there's one thing that you can't cover up, and that's an audited financial statement. The starting depreciation, or the cost of the arena, was $406 million. So, but if you take $406 million and you finance it over a period of 30 years, the end result is you got $1.3 billion in payments.
Oh, wow. So it's like if you buy a car. They say you buy a $20,000 car and you're paying a high interest rate, like 10%. and you finance it for 6 years, or that $10,000 car after you finance it 10% over 6 years is going to be like $50,000. So that's kind of what's going on with the arena right now.
That's exactly right.
Okay, so now in defense of the Arena Authority, when they say the arena only costs $267 million, I'm assuming what they're talking about is literally just the building itself.
Yes, that's
costs $267 million. That doesn't include the land, the cleanup of the land, or
the furnishings,
the
electrics in the building, and all that. You're exactly right.
Okay.
They're referring to the outright construction cost, not the land, which cost $105 million, and nor the electrics, nor a lot of the superfluous costs. The open the door, we're ready for business cost was $406 million.
Oh, wow. So they kind of go back. Now, I remember when the arena deal first came up. I was a member of YPAL at the time, and we was all championing the arena at that particular moment. But at that particular moment, the Charlotte Hornets were thinking about coming into town. And it was going to be a TIF district as well. But a TIF district was just supposed to be the arena. And so that means you would tax all the NBA players' salaries. And for those of you guys who don't know, NBA players get paid per game. So when you put a TIF district just on the arena, you were taxing not only the home team, which would have been the Kentucky Colonels, but
the visitors.
You tax the visitors as well. So like if LeBron came with his $100 million contract and all these other guys came in, NBA salaries since that time have just completely exploded. You would have taxed your team plus the away team plus the coaching staff and their support staff and everything else. And if I remember correctly, the Yum Center was going to kick in about $100 to $110 million for naming rights.
The Yum Corporation, right,
yeah,
right.
For the arena. And with the NBA and the Yum Center contributing that kind of money, that would have retired about a third
correct
of the debt. But the arena would have been cheaper because I believe at that time, if I'm not mistaken, the chief location was the water company site, which was $100 million cheaper than the site that the Yum Center is on now. So if that deal had been struck then and the NBA did come, with the numbers that you know and things of that nature, the arena would have been in really good shape.
It would have been a completely different financial scenario for sure, for certain. Besides that, I just remembered the name of the consulting firm that John Schnatter and David Jones, the original founder of the Humana, hired to bring in to make an assessment of the location, one of the water company site or the LG&E site. They paid $225,000 out of their own pockets to get this consulting firm from Denver, the leading consulting firm on arenas and stadiums in the United States, called the Bonham Group.
Okay.
The irony of this is the Bonham Group, their end result was that the arena should be located on the water company site because it's going to save, like you said, $100 million. I got a copy of the Bonham Group document, which was very thick, and I read it, and I thought, when I finished it, I thought, who are the three corporations that make up the Bonham Group? And one of them is, ironically, AEG, who, in the end, AEG has now been contracted to run and operate the Yum Center and try to make a profit, which is impossible. But anyway, I thought that was ironic.
Oh, wow, okay. So now we kind of revisit the history. Now, you said that with the renegotiation of the contract, the city of Louisville could save up to $300 million. So explain, how did you arrive at that $300 million savings?
Well, it's pretty simple. And here's the way it all came down. Back in 2017, the state legislature came to the abrupt recognition, with my help and a few attorneys. We went up to address the legislature about this and gave them all the numbers. They knew that with the increased debt service schedule that was in place at that time, that there was no way that the Yum Center was going to be able to pay their debt, and it was going to have to file bankruptcy by as early as 2020.
Oh, wow.
So they imposed House Bill 330, which was classified as the Yum Center bailout bill, and this was in the spring of 2017, and they voted it into law. And what that did was increase the state subsidy dramatically from a maximum of $265 million. This was through the TIF. The cap was $265 million. They extended it from 20 years to another 30 years beginning 2018, okay? And they removed the cap. Well, when you remove the cap on a 30-year-long tax incremental financing deal, then the subsidy just goes skyrocketing up, and it's now like $980 million for state taxpayers. And that's not all. That's not all. Because then the city, under pressure from the governor, passed an ordinance in August of 2017 to increase its subsidy of the Yum Center from $6.5 million for 30 years to $10.8 million for yet another 30 years. So you've got this increase in state subsidy, this vast increase in the city subsidy, and then the Yum Center's bonds, which were then rated junk, got refinanced on Wall Street. They got graded to investment. The bonds got reclassified as investment grade, and then the Yum Center went to Wall Street, got their bonds refinanced at a vastly less interest rate, and they stretched out the financing another 30 years, which made their payments about $10 million less per year. So if you've got the increased subsidies and your debt service goes down $10 million a year, then you've got a scenario, you might want to hold that going. You've got a scenario where the debt service, which is in red here, is one level, and you've got a combination of the state subsidy and the city subsidy, which is another level. And what you see in green here is about $10 million per year in excess subsidies. So we've got the city paying excess subsidies in the amount of about $10 million a year over and above what's needed to pay the debt service.
Oh, wow. So basically, so just kind of simplify this, the city is literally paying $10 million a year as their portion to subsidize and service the debt. $10.8 million a year over 30 years.
Correct. And they don't need to do it. Because the state is picking up, it's a state-owned entity anyway, and the state's picking up most of the tab. If the city just pays the difference between the state subsidy and the debt service each year, then they save $300 million. And that's undeniable. It's impossible to deny that those numbers are factual because I've had them reviewed.
And you pull those numbers straight from what the Arena Authority has given Wall Street.
Exactly right.
So those Arena Authority, pretty much those are Arena Authority numbers that you're using. So it's not something you made up yourself that you had to go calculate or something. That's just the numbers that they use, that they give to Wall Street, that they have to give Wall Street by law about their debts and how they service their debt on these bonds and things of that nature to build the arena.
Yeah, and the projections of the state, the only variable in that is the projections of the state subsidy, which comes from the TIF, and those are projections, but this last year they were very, very close to reality. So, it's highly over-subsidized. Why the mayor of Louisville or the Metro Council do not see that and pull it back to save expenses, I don't know.
So let me ask you this question, because you mentioned that in our conversations before, you mentioned that a lot of the issues or reasons that we're kind of in this predicament now is not so much the cost of the arena. It's the lease agreement with the main tenant, the University of Louisville. Kind of explain that to us.
Yeah, actually, the arena is the largest, most expensive arena in the United States that does not have a professional sports team in it. The lease between the Arena Authority and the University of Louisville is so highly disproportionate, it allows the University of Louisville Athletic Association to profit on 88% of all the revenues of the arena. You just can't build a $406 million arena and try to survive on 12% of the revenues.
So 88% of the revenues go to University of Louisville. So that's like, so if the University of Louisville sets one of their suite sales, so let's say an arbitrary number, let's say $1 million. 88% of that goes to University of Louisville.
Absolutely.
12% of that would go to
the Arena Authority.
The arena, and that includes signage, that includes concessions, pretty much anything that happens in the arena. Louisville gets, University of Louisville Athletic Association gets 88% of that, and it leaves 12% for the Arena Association or the Arena Authority to survive on.
To cover its debt, and that's the reason why it has to be subsidized by taxpayers. You and I and everyone else are paying the difference because of this highly disproportionate lease. If the lease was renegotiated, and I've had CPAs and myself look at this, if the lease was renegotiated to the extent that both parties, the Arena Authority and the University of Louisville Athletic Association, made 50% each of all the revenues, there would be no reason for any taxpayer subsidies of the arena.
So, like, could you even evaporate the TIF district at that particular point? It was a 50-50 split.
Well, the TIF district is another thing, but that's the state subsidy. And here's the way the TIF district works. There's a 2 square mile area around the arena.
Which is, and so people know this, that size of a TIF district is kind of unusual for a development because I even overlap some other TIF districts, which technically you're not supposed to overlap TIF districts.
4th Street Live is a TIF district. The Omni Hotel is its own TIF district. There's hotels within the arena TIF districts that are TIF. And just to explain, because a lot of people get intimidated by, well, what's a TIF? It's called tax incremental financing, and what they do, the state does, is they take a district and they identify all of the stores, the retail places, the hotels, everything, everybody that charges money for services and product. And they calculate a base year. 2008 was the base year for the TIF district. And everything over and above that in each ensuing year, the sales taxes, the property taxes, the occupational taxes, the arena gets 80% of the increase. Flows from the state into the arena rather than it going into the general fund of the state. So, like 2018, the increase, 80% of the increase and all those things related to about $11 million. So the arena got from state taxpayers $11 million that would have ordinarily gone into the state's general fund as sales taxes and property taxes.
Okay. So that's a big subsidy going to arena. So you're saying if you just renegotiate University of Louisville's arena deal, you could pretty much take care of the debt. But if I remember correctly, it was just a couple of years ago, this all came to a head when there was junk bonds, and they brought University of Louisville back to the table. The Arena Authority came to the table. The mayor's team came to the table. And then they, from what was told to me, that they kind of renegotiated terms.
Well,
so
here's what happened.
They can make it a little bit more equitable, and they can help pay down arena. But you're kind of saying that's not really what happened.
Yeah. There was a renegotiation, and the end result was this. 2 things. The University of Louisville succumbed to allowing the Yum Center to take certain dates in October, the start of the basketball season. They didn't control fully the October month. So they yielded on that. The other one is, you see these little yellow sections down here?
Mm-hmm. And I'm going to repost these for people online so you can see these yellow sections a bit better.
Yellow bars right below the blue. The blue is the state subsidy, indicates the $2.42 million that the University of Louisville Athletic Association yielded to the Yum Center. And rather than negotiate the lease, they just said, we'll just write a check out, $2.42 million. Now, Forbes magazine has reported that the University of Louisville Athletic Association receives more than $30 million per year from Yum Center related activities, and they were willing to give 2.42. The taxpayers are picking up the rest of the tab, so that's not, in my opinion, very equitable.
Okay, so basically Louisville kicked back $2 million a year off the profits they make off the Yum Center every year, and they let go of some of the control of some of the dates in early October. So for those who don't know, in Louisville's lease, and correct me if I'm wrong, the University of Louisville controls the dates before and after each men's and women's basketball game. So literally that makes it, as you said, about 7 months that the Yum Center, you just can't have anything in there, because when the basketball season kicks up, if Louisville men's play on a Monday, well, they control the dates Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, and the women's team play on a Wednesday, then they control pretty much the rest of the week. So you really can't program anything during the week.
Correct.
So you're just it just goes dark, and if the arena goes dark, it's not making any money.
Correct. The lease is so highly disproportionate, as I said before, it would never pass the test in a court of law because it was not negotiated on an arm's length basis.
Okay, so when you say arm's length, you mean that you really can't have a lot of conflict of interest between your main tenant, which is University of Louisville, and the arena. You're not supposed to have a lot of conflict of interest when you negotiate a lease, but like you stated earlier, of the 15 members of the Arena Authority, 8 of those had direct ties with the University of Louisville, which really made a conflict of interest. That's a quorum. That's a majority of the voting members.
Right. Right.
Interesting.
It is.
Very interesting.
Yeah. I'll say it again. I've said it before. The Yum Center is, the way it stands now financially, the Yum Center is simply a conduit by which taxpayer dollars flow into and out the other end into the coffers of the University of Louisville Athletic Association, making, by the way, the University of Louisville basketball program the richest in the country by far.
Oh, it's not even close. And then when you add on top of that, I believe this year will be the first year that University of Louisville gets the TV money from the ACC network, which will be launching this year, which will be an additional, I believe, almost $30 million a year coming from ESPN and from the ACC directly, from the football revenues and then things of that nature. So that's another substantial increase to the athletic fund coffers. Now, so let me ask you this question, because I know that recently there's been a big push from Mayor Fisher and others on talking about bringing an NBA team to university or to the Yum Center. That's kind of been a big push now. I know J. Bruce Miller has really been pushing this for decades. But I know recently it's kind of kicked up steam. This has been the first time that a mayor of Louisville has really endorsed the idea of going out and actually seeking an NBA team. So from reading the lease with the University of Louisville, explain to us why that's not really possible, that you can have an NBA team in the Yum Center with how the lease is structured now.
Yeah, the terms and conditions of the lease specify that the University of Louisville Athletic Association controls the arena for those 7 months that we mentioned. In addition to that, there are specific sections of the lease that restrict anyone from covering up the University of Louisville's nomenclature on the exterior of the building. Not to mention the leased facilities that you're talking about, the VIP suites. There's 72 of them, and they're owned by individuals here. And an NBA team just couldn't come in because the University of Louisville is just not going to allow the lease to be changed unless they're forced into it.
So basically, if I was an NBA team owner, I was a billionaire, and I was like, you know what, I want to put an expansion team here in Louisville, and we want to play in the Yum Center, we would literally have to force the University of Louisville to renegotiate their lease, because right now, as it stands, if I was to bring back, let's say, the Kentucky Colonels, because that was the team, that's a name always floated around, bring back the NBA name, the ABA name rather, of the Kentucky Colonels, to bring that back and to put our logo on the outside of the building would be a violation of the lease, because University of Louisville controls that. And I couldn't put any signage, any permanent signage up anywhere in the Yum Center, because that'll be a violation of the lease with the University of Louisville, nor could I sell or have any control over the suites, because that, once again, would be a violation of lease with the University of Louisville. So as an NBA team, the only thing I could really do to profit would be ticket sales and the TV revenue that the league really splits. And that's pretty much about it. So for the NBA team, that's a ton of lost revenue. There's
only one way an NBA team could participate with 42 games in the Yum Center, and that is the governor and the mayor will have to put pressure on the University of Louisville to renegotiate the lease to allow that. Now, there's all types of lip music from parties about, well, the University of Louisville will do that, but there hasn't been any substantive documentation that the University of Louisville would succumb to an NBA team coming to town. I don't think they'd really want that.
Right, the competition, I understand. And so another thing besides that, and so people know this, so people will know this, is that in other cities, such as Los Angeles, where the Staples Center is shared by the Clippers and the Lakers.
And a hockey team.
And a hockey team, yeah, the Kings. They're able to go in there and they have the signage set up. Well, if it's the Clippers night, they can go in there and take out all the Lakers logos and in one night replace it with all Clipper logos, so it becomes like a Clippers home stadium. And then the very next night, they can lay down the ice, and as the LA Kings, when they come in and play hockey, you can take down all of the Clippers logos and then bring in the Kings logos. And this is actually kind of commonplace with other arenas, especially other pro arenas around the country, where we kind of swap out logos or things of that nature as need be, for the tenant.
Yeah, and there's one other factoid that you need to know, and that is the University of Louisville Athletic Association's lease with the Yum Center goes for 36 years. There's no other lease in the United States by a collegiate basketball team for a lease that's longer than 10. So
that's a pretty long lease. So we kind of talked about what the lease agreement. We talked about, the financing district. So to go back a little bit with the arena deal, let me ask this question, because I remember, once again, when they first talked about the arena, it seemed like they had settled on the water company site. Then Ed Manassas, who was that time the editor of the Courier Journal, was like,
right.
Hey, the LG&E site on Main Street is 1,000 times better. You get river views. It's on Main Street. That's where we need to go. And it seems like at that particular moment, almost immediately, all the momentum shifted from the water company site to
the LG&E site.
To the LG&E site, and they kept saying, it's worth the extra $100 million. We get rid of this eyesore downtown, and all this other stuff. Do you know why that? Look, maybe went on behind the scenes, whatever, they kind of made that shift and momentum to add the extra $100 million to the arena to just move it over?
It did add an extra $100 million, and that was identified in the Bonham report. I don't know the reason why Ed Manassas became so adamant about that, or the reason why the shift, but you may know.
I wish I did know. I was all on board the water company site because I thought it was going to save money, and you could have shoehorned it and it would have fit, and you could have done some other things, but that's just that's just me. I thought that was kind of like a waste of $100 million.
There's one more topic that we failed to mention about the refinancing of the debt, which occurred in December of 2017, just a short 18 months ago. And I was amazed by this, but when the Yum Center went to Wall Street to refinance its debt, they added $40 million onto the principal. And I think I know the reason why they added $40 million on was because of the costs associated with all the attorney's fees and the bond sales fees and the restructuring of the debt. It states in their audited financial statement that the loss on the refinancing of the Yum Center was $20,500,000. So they refinanced approximately $40 million to pay the refinancing costs, and then a great amount of the balance was because they had the Louisville Arena Authority had robbed, and I'll say that again, had robbed the maintenance and renovation accounts, which were required by the bond and bondholders, and they had robbed those accounts down to zero. So they had to refinance more debt to replenish those accounts, because bondholders are not going to invest in an arena without a substantial amount of maintenance dollars and renovation dollars, because let's face it, this arena is now 10 years old. It's refinanced for another 30. So that makes it, at the end of the refinancing, 40 years old. There's arenas and stadiums that are knocked down after 30 years. So
oh yeah, okay.
There's a lot of maintenance and renovation
wow.
left.
So
to
when
do.
they refinanced, they had to add an extra $40 million on there, one to cover all the fees, attorneys, bankers, things of that nature. And then the second reason is because they depleted all the maintenance, you know, the almost insurance money for maintenance and things of that nature. So they had to add extra $20 million on top of that.
Yeah.
It came out to $40 million to replenish that.
They
going
illegally
forward.
used funds that they weren't supposed to use to pay debt prior to 2017. I'm talking about the Arena Authority.
All right, that's never good.
No, it's never good. So right now, the debt on the arena, the Yum Center Arena, is $377 million. It's more debt than there ever has been on the arena, and it will be more debt for the next 10 years, according to the debt service schedule. I mean, I can't say it enough times.
And then he took out an extra 30 years, so they added time to how much I have to pay these debts on. So it's almost like if I bought a car, and I bought a car with a 60-month payment, and I realized I can't afford this car 60 months payment, let me go back and refinance my debt. And instead of doing a 6-month payment, I wound up doing a 120-month payment to get my monthly payments down. But I just really had to increase the value of the car in order to do that. So I wound up paying more anyway for a longer period of time.
Right, a lot more. Yeah, a lot more. So we've got the situation now is between the state taxpayers and the city taxpayers over the course of the next 30 years, and this is all documented in the bond prospectus. We, the taxpayers, are going to have to pay $1.3 billion to the Yum Center.
For a $400 million arena.
Correct.
Oh, wow. So now, you also mentioned that with, as you said, if you just renegotiated the University of Louisville's lease agreement to 50-50, you could solve all this. But are there any other things that the Metro could do, any ordinances, any laws it could pass to kind of help with the financing of the arena?
Well, there's one, and back in 2010, the board of directors of the Arena Authority thought that charging performers and artists that would perform in the Yum Center the 2.2 occupational tax that we all have to pay who work in the city, they thought that would inhibit performers to come to the arena. They didn't do their research, because every other city that has arenas in the United States charge occupational taxes. So performers and artists expect that, but they in a clandestine deal with the city said, well, we're not going to charge them. So that's a revenue forgiveness that the city has done in multiple instances that would help finance the city and defray this $35 million supposed budget shortfall, which is false. That and things like not charging Churchill Downs any property tax for the last 17 years. It's ridiculous.
Oh wow! So well, since you brought it up about the property tax, I know a lot of folks that I know have been talking about that. And what you're referring to is that the city purchased the land that Churchill Downs is currently on.
If you call it that, for $1.
For $1. So basically you're charged property taxes on $1, which is nothing. So Churchill Downs, even though it's a $1 billion corporation.
Well, the city doesn't charge itself any property tax.
Yeah.
So
the city
was
owns
just
it.
a scheme that was perpetuated in order to keep Churchill Downs from paying property tax. This is a publicly traded corporation on the NASDAQ exchange. And why the city, Churchill Downs wasn't going to go anywhere. Why the city would go to the extent of taking possession and ownership of 145 acres of Churchill Downs property and the $500 million of improvements that are made on it is beyond me, because over the course of the last 17 years, it would probably bought in excess of $50 million to the city.
Oh, wow. And there's your budget shortfall.
That and $300 million of excess subsidies, and the 48% of the cost of the Omni Hotel, $139 million, and it just goes on and on.
So for those who don't know, the city of Louisville bonded to pay half the construction costs of the Omni Hotel.
Right.
So those are bonds that have to be paid back because they're like bonds and investments. So the city has to pay those back with interest. And we pay for construction for half the Omni Hotel, but we really don't own any of the Omni Hotel. So there's no profit sharing or anything of that nature with the city.
Yeah.
So basically, it's like we gave the Omni Corporation $130+ million to build a hotel in town.
Correct. That's correct. And the land.
And we gave the land for $1.
Yeah.
Which is prime downtown real estate, which I'm sure if you value that out, would be worth tens of millions of dollars.
Yeah. And I guess that what we're saying in essence is this city doesn't have a budget problem. It has a spending problem and a revenue forgiveness problem. And that's really basically it. Had it not been for all these giveaways, the city would be flush.
Well, there we go. That's, man, when you look at it like that, it's like really, I don't want to say depressing, but it kind of reminds me what's kind of going on right now in the United States as a whole, where it seems like at this point the federal government on a large level subsidizes wealthy individuals to make investments and backs their investments using taxpayer dollars.
This is not what taxpayer dollars, in my estimation, are for.
Which is crazy, because you're subsidizing people who could obviously afford to do these things on their own anyway, at the expense of everybody else. It's almost like you're taking their risk and you're socializing the risk and putting that risk burden on everybody else, but they get to keep all the capital gains and monies from those investments, whereas the taxpayers, the regular citizens, everybody else who's not in the elites, gets stuck with the bill.
Here's the bottom line. The bottom line to me as a taxpayer advocate is just
it's crazy.
It's egregious, because we've got a situation here where these, as you can see, all the green bar lines here are the excess subsidies, and the arena is accepting excess subsidies from the city, and the city is telling the taxpayers, if you don't pass, Metro Louisville Council, if you don't pass an increase in taxes, then we're going to be cutting essential services, police and fire. It just makes absolutely no sense. It's shameful for the Arena Authority to be accepting, in my opinion, accepting excess subsidies when the city is threatening to cut essential services. It makes no sense.
That is, now, have you had this conversation with any Metro Council members? Have they listened to you? Have you gone before Metro Council kind of to plead your case? Like, hey, what are you guys doing? We have the money. It's right here. This charge of 2.2% occupational tax on guys who are in the arena, and you can, it'll help a lot. Have you?
I have. There's a Metro Council member who was on the Leland Conway show after I was, and Leland Conway hooked us up together. His name is Anthony Piaggettini. And I met with him and his staff because they wanted to talk to me first before I addressed the Metro Council special committee called the Efficiency Committee. This was about 2 weeks ago. So I was scheduled to give a speech to the Metro Council special committee about this $300 million in savings. And the day before, on Tuesday, Anthony Piaggettini called me and said, "Dennis, I want to apologize." He said, "You've done a pretty good job on the radio, and apparently because a couple of state senators and representatives have come forward and they say, well, if there's excess subsidies being paid to the Yum Center, we want our part too, the state." So they're kind of arguing back and forth together between the city and the state about who gets a piece of the excess subsidies. So that's, I never, as a result of that, I never got an opportunity to address the Metro Council Special Committee.
Because not everybody wants a piece of the pie. They're overpaying.
The state and the city, right.
Wow, the state and the city. And now, as far as you know, has Mayor Fisher been receptive to, to what you have to say?
It's very unfortunate because what the mayor has done, and actually the Metro Council has done in another instance, is try to discredit me and anybody else, even though they encourage the general public to come forward if you have any ideas about how to save money. And then when you have an idea how to save money, and mine is well documented, then they try to discredit you like the mayor did Friday a week ago on the Leland Conway show. And he said, in short, Dennis couldn't possibly bring any financial experts to the table to confirm what he's saying, which is totally wrong. The numbers speak for themselves, and I stand by them.
Oh, wow. Now, what about even just doing the 2.2% occupational tax? That seems you could probably get at least some traction with that.
Yes, and I think that is going to be something that the Metro Council does impose, but of course that's going to be for the next year. But I believe that they are going to impose that occupational tax, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Dennis, thank you for coming by and talking with us today about how we can help Metro save $300 million, keep all the parks open, keep the golf courses open, the golf course stay open, but keep the park open the swimming pools, and not have to cut the libraries and everything else. Now, when you start to look at how much money we spend or how much money we give away and don't ask for anything in return, it's just it's mind-boggling. Especially talk about like Churchill Downs, who just recorded I think he said he got $258 million in wagering just on Derby, and he don't pay property taxes. It's
sinful.
It's almost like when you hear about companies like GE, Amazon, multi-billion-dollar corporations who pay zero income taxes. It's just like, it's just crazy.
It is. And as I'll say it again, the city doesn't have a budget problem. They've got a spending problem and a revenue forgiveness problem. The city's budget is roughly $850 million a year, and this supposed budget crisis is 35 million. That's 4%. There isn't a family, a household, a business, or whatever in Metro Louisville who couldn't cut 4% of spending. It's there.
Hey, once again, Dennis, man, thanks for showing up.
Thank you.
Hey, this is Haven Harrington, Main Events on Politics. Thank you guys for tuning in. Hey, once again, we're here live at the Tunerville Tavern every Monday between about 7 and 9 at 1201 South 1st Street. Enter in on the Oak Street side. We'd love to have you guys come down and hang out with us while we chop it up about all things politics and all things sports. Once again, Dennis, man, thanks for coming out.
Haven, thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye now.